Welcome to episode 7 of the PDS podcast. In today's episode, we'll be chatting with our guest about his new book, his life as a weather journalist, being a pilot, and more. But before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for today's episode, Miracle Dent Repair. We'll hear a little bit more about them a little later in the show. Also, if you're watching us live right now, just remember that this is the raw and uncut version of the podcast, which means you may see or hear some things that don't make it into the final episode. You may notice that we've got a special co-host today, and that's because Curtis is out sick. So we have Jordan Hall joining us today, co-hosting the show. So thank you, Jordan, for helping out with today's episode. And also during the break, you will have an opportunity to ask today's guests some questions of your own. So please send them to us in the comments and sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Our special guest today is Canada's favorite weatherman, Chris St. Clair. Chris was a weather journalist for 26 years at the Weather Network. He is also the author of Canada's Weather, available on Amazon, and has a new book called Weather Permitting, 25 Years of Ice Storms, Hurricanes, Wildfires, and Extreme Climate Change in Canada. It'll be available everywhere you buy books in the fall of 2022, so be sure to check that out. And welcome to the show, Chris. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I grew up watching you on TV, so it's kind of cool to sit here and chat with you.
Yeah, I did that for a long time. It was
When
fun.
when did you retire again? Was it 2016?
No, I just retired in July of this year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's yeah. It was. I did 26 years of that, and it was fun. I mean, it's weather, and people who watch your podcast are into weather, and it's just always been like a really cool thing to talk about because it's science and it's geography, and those are some of my favorite things. And yeah, I've been everywhere in Canada and a lot of places in the States, just focused solely on weather.
Right on. So when you were with the Weather Network, did you do like storm chasing as well for them, or mostly just in studio stuff? Or
I don't know that I would call it that I've ever. I've not gone, with a bunch of guys and gals, and in cars and trucks chasing storms. I've been in a lot of storms, but my role isn't or never was that of a storm chaser. My role has always been as a journalist to explain, to be a voice for the weather. When I first got into this, and I'll just tell you a story. Did you lose me?
Yeah, I lost you there for a quick second, but you're back.
Okay. When I first got into this, I always watched the weather, and I thought it was cool the way people did the weather on television. But I always felt that the weather never had a voice. Like nobody was ever speaking for the weather. Nobody was saying, this is what's happening in our atmosphere to make this happen in front of us as a snowstorm, or as an Arctic outbreak, or a hurricane, or a tornado. There was that was never explained. So I always set out that that's what I wanted to do, was explain the weather and be the weather's voice, so that people would understand what was happening around them. So whenever I've covered hurricanes or blizzards, I've always been that voice of explaining what's happening in the atmosphere. And over time, that evolved to also speaking for the people who are impacted by the weather, because I think that so much. I mean, weather is spectacular to watch. Like a tornado is amazing to see. A wildfire is stunning to watch. But there's so many people along the path of those events who have a voice in what they saw, how it impacted them, what they experienced, what the air smelt like as a storm got closer, and it was getting those words together from people and sharing them to help everybody get a greater understanding of what's so amazing about what happens all around us in our atmosphere. So that's what I've always tried to do. So I was never a storm chaser. I was always a storyteller, rather.
That's awesome. Yeah. So instead of instead of just this is what's happening, more of a this is why it's happening kind of thing.
Yeah, and the
Right on.
importance of why it's happening.
Yeah, right on. So you've got a new book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Weather
Sure.
permitting?
Yeah. It's funny because we were the publisher and I were talking about what we would call the book, and they said we need to work Canada into it because it's a book about Canadian weather primarily, and we want to get climate change in because that's really important. And anyway, the name Weather Permitting came from, if you're in Canada, you're familiar with This Hour Has 22 Minutes, the comedy show.
Yeah,
Okay, so Mark Critch on the show, his brother does the morning show on a radio station in St. John's, Newfoundland, K-Rock, and he and I talk on Twitter quite a bit. And I said, hey, by the way, I'm writing this book, blah 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 blah. And he said, oh, you should call it Weather Permitting. And so I said, I put that down in the list of names when I sent it off to the publisher, and they said, oh, that's the best name for a book. So it's actually kind of comes from him, the name of the book. But I've been in dozens of hurricanes and dozens of blizzards and dozens of thunderstorms and all that. And so I have like all these stories about how what these storms were like that I got to tell on television. But on television, you get to tell the story in 3-minute pieces, right? Even if you're there, like Fort McMurray, we were there for 8 days for the Fort McMurray fire, but we still, you couldn't tell the whole story on television. So the book gives you an opportunity to tell you all the other stuff that happened with the story. Like Fort McMurray, the wildfire in Fort McMurray, we didn't get there till 36 hours after everybody had been evacuated. But we drove, I got into Edmonton at like 11 o'clock at night, and my cameraman picked me up. Sean Legg is his name. He was our cameraman in Calgary. He was a great guy. And he and I were gonna head up there, but it was like so late at night. And we said, let's instead, we'll go first thing in the morning to Fort McMurray and we'll stay in Edmonton. So we went to a hotel across the road from the airport, and we pulled in the parking lot, and it was all like pickup trucks. And anyway, it was full. The place was packed, and people were standing around the parking lot, and they were drinking beers and stuff. And it smelled like smoke, like in the park. Like the air didn't smell like smoke, but the people smelled like smoke. So anyway, they were all the people who had evacuated from Fort McMurray, and they were staying at this hotel. And that's kind of like when the magnitude of that storm or that fire kind of became really apparent. And as we drove there, we would stop in little towns along the way. We stopped in Fort Saskatchewan at like 6 a.m. to do the morning show live hits back to Toronto. And when we were pulling up, we were going to go to like get some coffee, and there was A&W that was open. And so it's, on the main drag where all the fast food places are. And it's 6 a.m. And we go to the drive-through, and all along the driveway into the drive-through, there's jerry cans filled with gasoline with free, and they were for the people who were leaving. And and we pull up to get our coffee, and the guy said he gave us our coffee, and he said, no, it's free, and the coffee's free for anybody. And it was like, and so we kept experiencing this as we were driving towards Fort McMurray. And when we finally got there, there was like, you couldn't go in. The RCMP had the road blocked off like 10 kilometers out of town, and that was it. You didn't go any farther. And that's where we spent the next 5 days until they let the media go in and have a look at what was left of town. But anyway, my book is all filled with stories like it's just stories like that, about stuff that the whole story that never got told, about stuff like that.
All the extra details and whatnot.
Yeah, it's just, it's a lot of detail. But I mean, like when we were driving up the highway from, you go on the highway to Fort McMurray, and you turn off, and from where you turn off the road to Lac La Biche and the main road across there and up to Fort McMurray, it's like 150 kilometers, and there's like one town that's halfway up the road, and it's called Wandering River, and it's basically 2 motels, a Burger King, a gas station, and maybe 120 people live there, and that's it. And there's nothing else all the way up that highway. And
Yeah.
we were driving. We went. That's where we stayed. But we were driving past Wandering River, and on the road there was like abandoned cars, like people had just run out of gas and left their cars. There was like a RV trailer, like like a camper trailer, flipped on its side on the roof, all crushed up and smashed up in the center median. Obviously it had like come off their car, and they just ditched it and they kept on. And it was like a zombie apocalypse movie driving
Yeah.
up there. Just all this stuff that people had just left behind when they fled Fort McBrain. It's a book of stories about that.
Awesome. So again, for anybody that wants to pick that up, it'll be available on Amazon this fall of 2022.
Yeah, my old book's on Amazon now, but my new book, I was just talking to my Simon & Schuster, my publisher, today. It'll be out probably in October, and it'll be available. It'll be available everywhere you get books.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, anybody that's listening and watching right now, make sure you pick up that when it comes out, because it sounds like it's going to be pretty good.
Oh yeah.
2 more chapters to go.
There you go.
Right on.
So I read that you got your commercial pilot's license in '95. What type of aircraft did you end up flying?
I wanted to fly like big planes. And I'm rated on several types and multi-engine aircraft, but the airline industry went into one of its downturns when I was going to become a commercial pilot, and the jobs that were available were in places I really wasn't keen on moving to, I mean, they're great places, I suppose, to live, but I didn't want to live in, Thompson or Lynn Lake, and it was I was too late in life to sacrifice that much time. And at the same time, this opportunity to work at the Weather Network rolled around, so I stuck with that. But I still fly; it's fun.
That's awesome. I'm actually working on my student pilots right now. So
yeah, it's great, isn't it?
I love flying. It's a good time.
I know. Everybody says, "Oh, it's so expensive," and it's like it's no more expensive than golf.
No, realistically,
Really, yeah.
Yeah, real. I mean, yeah, there's an outlay to get your license and everything, and it'll cost $4,000 or $5,000. But that it's like good golf clubs are expensive, and greens fees are expensive and stuff. And renting a plane, you rent them by the hour, and it's $75 to $100 an hour, but it's fun.
You're flying.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'd honestly rather be flying than playing golf.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool about flying, especially when you get like where you are, flying in, like when you're getting your license and you're a student pilot and you're flying like a Cessna or a Piper. A Cessna is better because the wings over top, and so you have a way better. Yeah, you have such a better view. But it's like you get to see geography so much better. And I always loved geography. I was going to be a geography teacher. That's what I wanted to be when I was in school. But you get to see like escarpments, and you can see doldrums in the ground. You see all these really cool geographic and topographical features that you never see when you're driving through them. You see them when you're driving through them, but you understand their scale better. And if you're really if you're into weather, you get this sense of how the role that the land plays in influencing everything that's happening above the land.
Absolutely. So what came first, would you say? Your love for flying or your love for weather?
I grew up in Nova Scotia, so the weather was always something that I always liked. I always liked airplanes. It's a toss up. I mean, the two of them are married anyway. I mean, the reason why they hired me was I had a lot of broadcast experience before I started working for the Weather Network. I'd been in media for 20 years before that. But when you learn to fly, like a third of everything you learn when you learn to fly is meteorology, and at the time that was a ton of meteorology experience in my head, and so I knew a lot
Mm.
going to work there.
I've noticed there's quite a bit of crossover between storm chasers and pilots. Like you see a lot of storm chasers becoming pilots or pilots becoming storm chasers just because of that grouping of the two together, really.
Yeah, I was with Mark Robinson, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we were down at Irma in Florida, whenever that was, 2018, and because Mark has a storm chasing buddy who flies flies cargo planes in Miami. So I met up with him. Yeah, and there seem to be a lot of people who fly who chase
For
too.
sure. Oh, I guess that question's yours, Jordan.
Which the
Number
yeah,
three.
what was your favorite part of flying? I was like, we're all over the place anyway.
I'm sorry.
No, what is or was your favorite part of flying in general?
There was I liked every bit of it. There's nothing I didn't like. I loved planning a flight. I mean, like sitting down with maps and planning a flight and doing weight and balance for for your plane and all of that. I loved I used to, when I was learning to fly and when I was building hours, I would go to get my weather briefing at the airport that I flew at there, because Environment Canada still had an actual weather person at that airport taking observations every hour. But I would go in to get the weather for my route, but I would sit and talk for like an hour about what the weather was, and we would just shoot the crap about weather for an hour. So I always liked doing that. And I liked everything. I love to do the pre-flight on the plane and a walk around, and I love the actual, the joy of flying. It was fun to, try and execute like a perfect, instrument approach. It was like, I liked all of it. But, I think what I really liked about it was it was everything was planned perfectly. Like it was all about, like, flying's all about planning and running checklists and making sure you have everything in where it needs to be so that it works out perfectly. I mean, a lot of that applies to what you guys do when you storm chase is you plan. I mean, you need to plan, and you need to know what's happening where, and you need to know where your escape routes are going to be and what roads you want to take, so you know that you've got, ways to be in the right place, but then ways to make sure that the right place doesn't turn into the wrong place really fast. I mean, it's all about, being successful in things is all about planning and making sure that you're successful in things. And that's what I liked about flying. It really taught this discipline about, if you're going to go in, make sure you got a full bag of tricks, and then you got another full bag of tricks in your other pocket too.
It's pretty interesting because if you look at it with flying, yeah, flying's great. It's just like getting a tornado. Getting a tornado is great. But everything leading up to that flight or leading up to getting that tornado has a big, like, it's fun all the way up to the point.
Yeah.
And it's all about the journey to get there. So that's something I enjoy too.
Awesome. Well, that already takes us to our first break. So if anybody that's watching live has any questions for Chris or Jordan or myself, now's the time to let us know in the comments. We'll take a 5-minute break here, and then we'll get back to the show. During the break, I am going to quickly run and grab another drink, and I will be right back.
I'm going to do the same. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'll wait for you.
What was that?
I said, I'll wait for you.
Whereabouts are you in Oklahoma?
I just moved to Norman, actually.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes.
You work, like, what do you do in your real life? Like, do you work at the Storm Prediction Center?
No, I just got out of an engagement about 2 months ago. I was living in Rapid City, South Dakota. And
Okay.
so I moved down to Norman so I could actually focus on chasing full time. So I storm chase, but my favorite thing is doing the multimedia journalism side.
Okay.
So I like filming breaking news video and all that stuff, and getting B-roll video for potential documentary
Yeah.
styles. So I love doing that.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do people pay much for it? I mean, I know where I work, they were notoriously cheap.
Just depends. I mean, depends on the video. I know if you get decent, like if you get damage video and it's like breaking news and you get it up, you can make maybe a couple thousand, depending. Just depends on which networks want to buy it.
Yeah.
And a big thing is something I've noticed is people don't. Sometimes you'll get somebody who will drive by and take a picture or a video, and they'll never watermark it, and they'll upload it, and then boom, it's free. And people just use it. And that'll undercut you a lot. But
yeah.
Well,
you're in the right place to get lots of video. But
yes,
kind of. How was this year? Kind of quiet, or I don't know. I mean,
2021 was odd. It was a weird year. I know. In the last month and a half, I've been the busiest I've been all year, which is crazy for being January and December.
Yeah. What's it been like? Have you been? Were you chasing? Did you go after that long? You remember that, like that one that went through Kentucky?
Yeah, we were on that, and we actually we got hit by debris in the car. We were right next to it when it passed the road.
That was like what? That one was like 200 miles long. On the track.
Yeah, they had that storm track at like 250 miles. It looks like the tornado might have recycled, so it might have been more than one tour. But I mean, those were very, very long-lived tornadoes and strong. And when it crossed the road in front of us, it was a big stovepipe. I mean, it was violent already. So we were on it right at the beginning, and it just kept going.
Wow.
So we have a question from Cara Jean for all of us. Whoever wants to answer first, go ahead.
What made you guys want to get into weather? If you didn't get into weather, what would you be doing currently? I'll answer it first, I guess.
Sure.
If I wasn't doing weather, I would be flying. Is definitely be going to like ATP flight school, probably, to be honest. So
yeah.
For me, I got into weather really young as a kid. My dad was really interested in weather, and he'd kind of take me around locally around our town, and we'd chase storms kind of locally up around Lake Manitoba and stuff like that. And it just kind of grew into something I really enjoyed doing. And I decided once I got a driver's license, I decided to start chasing on my own and really grew my passion, started learning more about the weather and teaching myself online and stuff like that. And yeah, I honestly don't really know what I would be doing if it wasn't for weather. Probably working on cars or construction or something like that.
You know, whereabouts in southern Manitoba are you? Just
Portage la Prairie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I used to do, the guy at the radio station in Portage used to call me. I used to do stuff with him, like interviews and stuff. Like when you had the big flood in Portage 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, when they breached the levee for the reservoir to let the water out.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost went out there for that.
Oh really? Yeah, that was a bad one around here.
Yeah.
So,
did you see Curtis's comment?
Yes, I did. So sorry I couldn't join tonight. Love listening to you, Chris. Thank you, Jordan Hall, for filling in for me while I battle a man cold.
Those man colds will get you every time.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's just a man cold.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I will play our sponsored ad and then we can get back to the show.
Sure.
Hail damage. It can happen at any time, and when it does, bring it to the hail repair specialists at Miracle Dent, because dents are what we do. Our paintless dent repair process maintains your original factory finish with no repainting or parts to order. You'll have your vehicle with its original factory paint back in no time like it never happened. If Mother Nature has put a dent in your summer, come to Miracle Dent Repair. Dents are what we do.
It's your part, Jordan.
I keep forgetting that I'm green. Sorry. All right, we're back. Now it's time for our 21 question segment where we get to learn a little bit about Chris's life and his online personality. Hope we're ready for that. All right, so what was your secret weapon when you reading the models, Chris?
My secret weapon when I read the models.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have a secret weapon. I mean, they're so fickle. It's my secret weapon was, and I was lucky because we always, I'm not a meteorologist, but I can read a model. I can look at a model and read it and understand it. But I think the trick is, depending on what you're looking for, I was lucky because we always worked with like a team of meteorologists. There was always 3 or 4 of us. Or 5 of us in the office at one time. So when I would do my show on Saturday and Sunday morning, we get together at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and there was a briefer for Western Canada and a briefer for Eastern Canada, and then there was one who was like kind of looking after everything. And so we would all sit down. We would actually just sit down and have a conversation about whatever the biggest story was and whatever little anomalies were, because like in the Great Lakes, snow squalls were always a thing, and you want to get that right. Thunderstorms. I like thunderstorms. I think they're neat and everything. I think forecasting them is people who forecast thunderstorms are a breed unto themselves, because they're so difficult. It's so hard to get it right. I mean, Brad Rousseau, who works at Environment Canada now, was one of our the best we had at the Weather Network for forecasting thunderstorms, and he's a great chaser and everything. But I mean, he was the go-to guy always when there were thunderstorms, and Brad would often go, I don't know. So I don't know the secret weather. The secret weapon was coming to a good consensus, but it depended on what it was. Like some things always work out the way they're supposed to. Like nor'easters in Atlantic Canada always go the way they're supposed to go. It seems an atmospheric river in BC seems to always go the way it's going to go. But like thunderstorms they're so model dependent, but so much intuitiveness is involved in that too.
Yeah, there's even like so much to do with like you were mentioning earlier with like terrain enhancements affecting them and everything like that. There's a lot that goes into that part of it.
Yeah, there is, and one of the chapters in my book that I just finished writing this week was about the Toronto floods in, and I can't remember if it was 2013 or 17, but it was the one. The damage wound up being over $850 million. It was almost $1 billion flood in Toronto.
Jeez.
But and Dave Sills wrote a whole paper about this particular one event. It happened on the 17th or the 8th of July is when it happened. Anyway, but he wrote this whole paper because it was one of these situations where the lake breeze faltered just a little bit, and the cold core out of the top of the thunderstorms that were up over Newmarket and Markham in the north of the city, that air created a gust front, and just the gust front and came to the south just as the lake breeze faltered just the slightest amount, and an inflow of warmer air came over the Niagara Escarpment from the southwest, and it created this perfect, almost unforecastable event that led to a thunderstorm that just sat over downtown Toronto for an hour and a half and put down, 6 inches of rain, more rain than they get in 2 months in 90
Yeah.
minutes.
Wow.
But it was, but anyway, Dave Sills wrote this great at the Northern Tornadoes Project. They've written this great piece about it. You can just Google search it, but it like the detail they went into in analyzing all the radars and the research they're doing into lightning and how lightning works within clouds and in often directing the way a cell will move and everything. It's such cool stuff, and you read that stuff and you go, we don't know anything.
Jeez.
Like it's just one of those with the atmosphere. It's just like the more you know, the more you realize there's so much more to know about the atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know everything.
Mm-hmm.
You're even like I've noticed storm chasing every time I go out, I'm learning something new. There's always something new to learn about the weather for sure.
Yeah.
So what would you say is something what is something interesting that most people don't know about you?
Something interesting that most people don't know about me. Well, only the people who I work with know. I never stop when I was on TV. When I never stopped walking, I walked all the time. Like when I was in the studio, I would walk. I just never stopped walking. I always like the camp, I'd do my 4-minute piece and then we'd be off for 4 minutes and I come back on. But during the 4 minutes, I would walk. I never stopped walking. It was how I kept energy up to make it exciting.
Okay,
So yeah, maybe
cool.
that's something nobody knows. I can talk like a duck.
Well, let's hear it. Awesome. What do you enjoy most about presenting the weather?
Yeah, I like making the story. It's Canada's an enormous country, and I liked going in there. I liked going through all the video that came in over the past. I was lucky on the weekend because like when people watch TV on the weekend, they watch it differently. They watch it like that's when all the news shows are on Sunday morning and everything, and people kind of have a little more extra time. So I think their mind is more open to not just getting their forecast for today, but learning a little bit about what happened over the past week. So I always enjoyed the challenge of sitting down and saying, okay, well, what's really important? What are the 3 most important things that are happening today that are like the big weather stories? And then what's happened this past week that's related to those 3 stories? And then bringing it all together with the video and the maps. And I loved when my alarm went off at 1:30 in the morning and I got up and started to go through my phone and look through all the videos that we had and all the producers' notes from the past week and sit down with a pencil and a paper, which is what I did in my hotel room for 3 hours, and I would write out everything we were going to do, and then I go into work at 4 and we put it all together. That was my favorite thing, and I miss that a lot. It was fun.
That's awesome. How did you get interested in the weather?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I lived in Halifax, and Halifax. If you've not been, it's right on the ocean. It's on a peninsula, and it's a hilly city. It's very hilly, and so we lived in some high ground on the shores of Bedford Basin, which is like a big bay that comes in from the sea. And my favorite thing when I was a kid, we would ride our bikes at night, but the fog would drift in and the harbor would disappear, and then the city would disappear below you, and very slowly the fog, as it built, would build up, and you could see it actually like coming up this, because we're on a hill, you could see it like creeping up the hill, so fog's my favorite kind of weather, and I just always remember that as a kid. I loved fog. You'd ride your bike we lived on the top of the hill, and you'd ride down the hill into the fog, and the temperature would drop as you got into the fog. It got colder, and of course it was damp and wet, but it was fog. I think that's when I got into weather, because I thought that was just like cool to watch a cloud come and go almost every day.
Nice. Yeah, my mom's side of the family is actually all from Dartmouth, so I've been out there quite often, and there's nothing quite like that Nova Scotia fog, that's for sure. it gets pretty thick out there.
Yeah, it gets thick. I mean, I remember when I was in high school and it was our graduation and we were driving down to the South Shore to someone's party. And I remember we were driving and the fog kept getting thicker and thicker. And all of a sudden it was like, we were driving on the highway and we were down to like 10 miles an hour because the fog was like so thick you couldn't see. It was like the worst kind of a whiteout, but it was just fog, but it gets that thick. And yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I love it.
I remember the one time I was out there on visiting family out there, and we were on our way to the airport actually to head home, and it was probably, I don't know, it must have been 4 or 5 in the morning, and just a thick fog the entire way to the airport. Couldn't see a thing, and I remember that clearly. I was just a kid, but that was probably the first time I ever saw a fog quite that thick, and it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Who's been your most important professional mentor?
Boy, most of my professional mentors were really young in my career. There's been people that I've really admired for the way they present themselves. The person who gave me my first job was a guy called David Wolf. He hired me when I was in high school to do a radio show on the all night radio show in Halifax. Brian Phillips, who was the guy who did the morning show, was super popular morning man, Atlantic Canada, taught me. He let me watch him work, and I learned a lot about communication from him. Learned a lot about humor from him, and then there's just been a lot of people who I admired on television. I like Johnny Carson. I'm old, so I like Johnny Carson, but I liked the way Johnny Carson was just natural and never tried to be funny, but funny stuff always happened. I like interviewers who ask the question and then let the person answer the question. It's kind of weird being interviewed because I prefer interviewing people rather than
Roles reversed.
Yeah.
So, how has technology evolved the way the weather is presented over the span of your career?
Yeah, so much. When I first started at the Weather Network, we were in Montreal at the time. We had a satellite loop of North America, like goes east and goes west, the two satellites. We had the radar for Halifax, wherever the radar site. Anyway, there was like a radar for Halifax, Montreal, the Ottawa, the King City, the one in Manitoba. I mean, that was it. And then all of our maps were hand drawn with sim paint, which I don't know if you're familiar with sim paint, which was in 1980s and perhaps early 90s, like Commodore 64 kind of computer drawing program to make maps. I mean, that's what it was like. I mean, it wasn't chalk like it was in the 50s and 60s on a chalkboard like Percy Saltzman did. But I mean, there weren't many tools. I mean, the Weather Network, we didn't have satellite trucks or anything like that. We didn't have the real capability to go live until the Gero units came about in 2012. Before that, we would go out and shoot stuff, but then you had to drive the video back to the station, or you had to, if you're out of Toronto, you had to send it back by FedEx. Before the internet was a thing, that's how you sent stuff around. I mean, then you could email it, but you have to sit there and it would take forever to send it as an email.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so technology has changed so much. I mean, the Gero that is I don't know if you're familiar, but it's like the box that is, when it came out, it was like groundbreaking technology because they didn't cost as much. I mean, a satellite truck $400,000-$500,000. A Gero unit is the size of a small briefcase, and you connected your camera into it, and then it dialed into the cell phone network and made a cell phone call and sent your video and audio feed as data bursts back. Well, it's an app on my phone now. Like you don't even need a cameraman. It's just an app on my phone, and I can just click it and type in the code, and I can go live from wherever there's a cell phone signal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
technology has changed so much. And, even social media has changed. I mean, the Weather Network was fantastic at tapping into crowdsourcing people to provide them with video. That's that, I mean, 80% of the video on the Weather Network's all viewer video. It's all crowdsourced.
Mm.
So yeah, that's been the biggest difference in weather is that there is just the technology in forecasting has come leaps and bounds. The technology in presenting it has come leaps and bounds with 3D animations and stuff that weren't available, and then the inclusion of people who watch weather to include what they're seeing as part of it makes it really communal. And I think that's what's kind of cool about the weather community is it's a really communal group of people who love weather, but in Canada and people will say this who live in other countries. Well, we love the weather too. I don't know if they love it as much as we love it in Canada. And Canadians really hug and embrace their weather, and they love to share stories about it, and are willing to do so all the time.
Absolutely. Even oat chasing in the field, there'll many times there'll be some random farmer coming up with his favorite storm story to tell us or anything like that. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. So you already kind of talked quite a bit about this, but in 2016 you were in Fort McMurray and covered the wildfires. Is there anything additional you'd like to talk about with that?
Well, I mean, it's the Fort McMurray wildfires is really interesting. The fire is a whole story unto itself that I could go on and on about, and it's a real neat set of circumstances that led to that fire. And the fire is a real signal to the dangers we're in, particularly in the boreal forest in northern Canada as the climate changes. But that story for me was more about the people. I mean, I remember when like 80,000 people, 85,000 people live in Fort McMurray, and everybody except for the firefighters evacuated, and not all of them went out of town to the south. A lot of them, because of the fire that was to go, they went north to Fort McKay, which is an oil camp 40 kilometers north of Fort McMurray. But about 8 or 10,000 people went up that way. So anyway, they had to stay there until it was safe to be evacuated out. And the only way out again was to go back through Fort McMurray. So they got police convoys through the town and out. And they knew they were coming and down the road, so they had set up like great big gas trucks to fuel their cars along the road when they came through, and there was food and stuff like that. But and just the story about the people. This family came out, a dad and a mom and like 3 boys, and they had to stop, and there's like outhouses set up for them to go use the porta potty, and the kids ran off to use the porta potty. and this big guy, big burly guy, like he looked like he worked on the rigs, but he was pumping gas into their car. He was dirty, and he had a ball cap on, and he hadn't shaved in a few days. And he got down and said to the kids, "Hey, do you guys want some sandwiches?" And everybody kind of looked at each other, and he said, "There's all kinds of food over there. Just go get some food." And so anyway, the family went over and got some food and got back in their car, and away they drove. And I was interviewing him before the family came up, and so we got back to doing our interview, and we talked about it and everything. He was a big, burly, manly guy, and he just started to cry, and he just said, "This is so sad and so hard to see all these families who've lost their homes and lost everything." And there was this communal sense that you saw another side of people that you never ever would have thought you would see from people. Yeah, and I just it was I'll never forget the way that those people behaved, because there was never ever a person who didn't give something to somebody else, and there was never any expectation. It was just an honest give all the time.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah. But I mean, Canada, like they raised, like the Red Cross laid tens of millions of dollars over the course of a weekend for those people. I mean, it was just, there was this, I mean, it was the story of the year.
Yeah. The whole country basically came together on that one.
They did, yeah. And the interest was worldwide. When I was there, I mean, ITV in England called and wanted to do, for me to do reports for them about what was going on. And like there was not just interest in Canada. There was like the interest was global on that particular story.
Yeah.
So yeah, as somebody who does reporting and on TV a lot, I'm sure you get your fair share of insults. So what's an insult you received that you're actually proud of?
Well, it's well, if you do weather, it's always, there's always the one that, it'd be nice to get to make get your job wrong every day and never get your job right and get paid. It's like, it's just like, really, is that the best you've got? I mean, there's those, but yeah, I don't, I mean, whatever. I mean, people are, then you go do it, so that none of them bother me, but I do have a funny story about Newfoundland and about weather. And because when I've been to Newfoundland a lot for hurricanes and stuff like that. And every time I go there, they say to me, and they'll say, "Oh, you're here for the storm." And I'll say, "Yeah." And they'll say, "Well, you should have been here for the last one." And it's always like, whatever's going to happen, the best one was the one that you weren't there for. So that's my favorite thing about there's just like so many weatherisms from Newfoundland, but that's one of my favorite ones is always, "Well, you should have been here for the last one." So you can have like the best storm and they'll say, "Oh, well, should have been here before."
Yep, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So you kind of already answered this one too, but tell me about the 3 most influential people in your life and how they impacted you.
Well, my wife is like, she's perfect. I mean, she explained to me why people like what I do. She explained why people like weather so much to me in the simplest of terms. And I thought, wow, that is brilliant. So she's super influential to me, and and helps me see through all the BS a lot that's going on. She's like, so that's great. Yeah. Who else is it? My daughter's influential. I mean, my daughter's, of course, she's younger than me, but but I mean, I'm 60 plus, so she keeps me really connected with her generation, your generation, and it's important to be able to make that connection. At least it certainly was when I was working on television, so that I didn't come off like some old fuddy-dud, but I actually seem to be able to relate to people. So she's great at keeping me, and she'll say, "Oh, Dad, geez, don't do that. Don't do TikTok videos, whatever you do." So yeah, those have been some really influential people in my life. Those 2 for sure. A third, boy, it'd be a toss up. I couldn't name a third right off the top of my head.
That's all right.
Live TV must be difficult to navigate. What's the biggest surprise that you've had on live TV?
Well, there's not so much live TV as there used to be anymore. Most stuff's pre-taped. I mean, even everything I for the past 15 years rarely did anything. Like we did near live television, so we would, because if you're doing everything live, you make mistakes, right? And like on the Weather Network, like CNN's right beside us on one, and so you got to be as good as everybody around you. So we did near live. We would record it, make sure it was perfect, and then it would go on the air. So it was like, it was not live, but it was like 5 minutes old. So that's changed a lot. But I guess what's surprised me most about television? Yeah, what surprises me is how it's funny, because so few people, I mean, people still watch TV, but they watch it so much differently now. but it still seems to be a big deal when people are on TV. It's like you can have way more people watching a podcast or on a Twitter feed, and yet if you have a TV show, there's
Yeah.
still some bling on that, I guess. Yeah, and it just kind of surprises me that it's because it's just a person. It's just a
Yeah.
person whose talent happens to be talking
There you go.
or turning letters.
Oh, yep. There you go. So you have the title of Canada's most dependable weather.
Yeah.
So how do you create your weather forecasts?
Oh, well, the trick, well, I guess if I don't do it anymore, I can give away some secrets. The trick was to never speak. I never spoke in the present tense. So if you don't speak, if you always speak in the future tense, and if you never go to an exact specific thing, you will rarely be wrong. So if you can say there'll be thunder showers this afternoon, and then you can refer to a map and say generally here, then there's a lot of wiggle room on that in exactly where. Not that I'm trying to blow dust and smoke over it. I mean, it's really important. It's really important to be honest. And then if you're running like a future radar, which we would run, and it was all built on model data. But if you were running a future radar and you run it slow, people can see that big red blob's coming over their house. Now it may or may not come because the future radar is, it's a computer model and it's suggesting something in 5 hours. But if you're really clear with people that this is just a projection of what could happen that this one computer is thinking, and then if you can get the other model and run the other model and say, and this is what the other one's doing, it's saying it may be a little bit off of there. But so if you're honest with people and then you go and you invest some time in explaining that properly, but in terms that everybody can understand, I think it makes you become a dependable, trustworthy person.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What has been your greatest weather-related accomplishment to date?
I guess. Gee, I think that I think I've been. I mean, being able to write 2 books about weather has been great. Because a book lives forever.
Mm-hmm.
The first book has some weather stories in it. It's almost like it's more of an instructional book for somebody who's getting into weather, so that they can learn about the weather. But to introduce people to, when I wrote that book, some of the greater ramifications of climate change was a contribution that I was happy to make. The fact that I got to spend a lot of time I did 5 separate interviews with David Suzuki that went on for 4 or 5. Total time was 4 or 5 hours from those. I spent a lot of time with Jane Goodall interviewing her, so I got to talk to some really cool people and put together their stories, and those were shared online and on the Weather Network, and they were important stories about how the fragility of our climate and our ecosystems on our planet. And so to be able to pass on some of that information, that would be what I was striving for all along.
Awesome.
Fantastic. All right. So what's your biggest failure and what did you learn from the experience?
Oh, my biggest failure.
It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a good one, because you don't think about failures. But I guess you always learn about yourself that sometimes I'm pretty rigid in the way I want to do things, and sometimes some people don't fit into doing things the way you want them to do. So, you know, learning to overcome things like that. That's if I had a failure, that's what it would have been, was that sometimes I was too rigid in things that I wanted to do, and some people didn't buy into it the way I wanted them to. So that's I would consider that to be a failure. The fact that I learned about it would, I guess, correct the failure.
Awesome.
Out of all of the amazing weather events you have covered, which one stands out the most to you, or is the most important to you?
Boy, they're all important in their own way. Fort McMurray was important, I think, on so many levels that I've already talked about here tonight. I'm trying to. I can't think of the number of hurricanes, but Irma wasn't a particularly important hurricane to cover in the States, simply because, you know, it had come. You know, there had been Harvey. There was. I mean, it was like that year was catastrophic in the Caribbean, and to be able to cover that particular hurricane, which did some wild things. I mean, it wasn't as destructive. Well, it was pretty destructive in Haiti, but I mean, Maria, you know, decimated Puerto Rico, but Irma did really wild weather things. We were in Sarasota, and you know, the seiche that took place when the water drained out of the harbor at Sarasota, you know, and at the same time flooded Miami and Fort Lauderdale downtown. Excuse me. That was cool to see, but it was. There were some cool social things that happened during that storm, where you saw some real disparities with the way, you know, some people, you know, it's bizarre to see people, you know, like Haiti gets decimated, and, you know, 800 people die. And people who had just suffered through an earthquake that destroyed their country and live in tin shacks, and then they have a hurricane come and erase all their tin shacks and kill all their crops. And then we go to another place, Florida, and you're in Naples, like one of the top 3 highest per income cities in the United States, and you see like this disparity, and and yet they get the same kind of damage there, but the houses are better and are built because there's more money. And so you see these disparities. I think that was, you know, I think that really stands out in my mind, is how, you know, a wealthy nation is able to withstand a disaster so much better than an impoverished nation. The weather doesn't care. You look at what happened to the Bahamas, where there's a fair amount of wealth, and then was the hurricane that decimated the Bahamas 2 years ago. Its name skips my mind, but will come to me. But I mean, there's this disparity, and I think that's what we need to be aware of, is that that's important.
All right, so we're gonna change the questions a little bit.
Okay.
If you won $10 million tomorrow, what would you spend it on?
I would buy a plane. Yeah,
Hey.
I would have a plane. It's funny, you know, because like the lotto was like $48 million last week or something in Canada. I thought, wow. And then I started looking up, like, well, what could you buy like a Citation jet for? I mean, and so if $10 million is certainly plausible.
There you go. Was it Hurricane Dorian, by the way?
It was Dorian. Yeah, it was Dorian.
I had to Google it. All right. And then what's one lesson your job has taught you that you think everyone should learn at some point in their life?
To listen to other people. To listen to what people are saying to you. And to really listen to what they're saying. Because sometimes, yeah, it's just, listen to people. Yeah, everybody has a valid thought most of the time.
So this next question's been answered already, so I'm going to come up with one off the top of my head. As a pilot, have you ever planned a flight specifically in an effort to view a weather event from the air or anything like that?
No, I haven't, but I did get caught in weather once, and I was flying at night, um, and I flew into a snow squall, but like aloft, and so that was like freaky, because it just like the visibility went to nothing fast, and I was in a Cessna, so it wasn't like the best plane, and so I got thinking, because it was a snow squall, I got thinking, oh geez, how fast is this? Are the wings going to ice up on this plane? And how and and then it's like which way was I wasn't quite sure which way the squall was going, but I had to figure out how to get out of it really quick. So yeah, that was yeah. So I wouldn't want to do that again.
Yeah, that'd be scary in a small plane like that for sure.
Yeah.
Hey Jordan, where'd you go?
Somebody was banging on my door.
Oh.
I don't have anybody coming over right now.
Probably Amazon.
No, it was the wrong door. So okay, which leads us to our next question. So, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Well, I think that it was just that people learned something from me, and I was as genuine as in person as I am here and on TV.
That's awesome.
What is one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting out in your career?
Yeah. Same thing. Be genuine. Just be you. It's funny because I trained a lot of people who worked at the Weather Network. When they would hire people that I would work with them to get them up to speed on doing weather. Because the cool thing about what we did there was no teleprompters or anything like that. There's no script. It was just all up here, and it was creating a story. And so the advice I would give anybody who wants to do what you're doing, and it's just a conversation, but when you're out, like when you're in the field, like when you're chasing, and it's like there's so many things that people don't know who watch. It's like what is like on a hot day and you're chasing and you've pulled off to the side of the road and there's like fields of soybeans, there's fields of corn, right? And there's all this, transpiration taking place. What's this smell like? And it like I find that not enough people actually create that because I have never chased a tornado and would like to, for the simple reason to be able to do the reports, because there's so many things that I know I would smell and you could feel in the air, to be able to talk about those things. And so many people, like, they focus on the storm and they're like, there it is, but they're not talking about like it's as humid as hell here today, or like this wind that's blowing now. It's like it was humid 10 miles ago, but it's as dry as can be now, and this is like whatever it is, but it's explaining those things, because we can, on TV you can see stuff but you can't smell stuff and you can't feel it. You can only see it. And so to anybody who's going to get into like doing video and video of this stuff, is like, make it all come alive that way. That's, I wish I was younger so that that's what I could do now, but I'm finished, but that's what I would do.
Awesome. Sounds like you need to come out chasing in the prairies sometime.
I would be fun.
Speaking of that, what is your most favorite trip that you've ever taken?
I've never been disappointed in a trip to Newfoundland. It's spectacularly beautiful. The weather, like in Newfoundland, when the wind goes below, like every day's a windy day there. I mean, like it's friggin' windy all the time. It's a great place for weather because you can get everything in one day. The topography of the land is mind blowing. It's just like the fjords and the ruggedness of it. I've never been disappointed in going to Newfoundland. I mean, I've loved my trips to BC and Alberta and Manitoba and Ontario and Quebec and in the States, but I've never ever been disappointed with Newfoundland. You'll always get something when you go there.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to keep.
Out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to keep that one in mind.
Well, I mean, they like they're like St. John's has windstorms with in the winter that are as strong as hurricanes, like 5, 6, 7 times a winter.
Yeah.
And it's like it's just like it's unbelievable. Like when you go there, all the trees like they only grow 8 feet tall because that's all they can grow because of the wind.
They've
That's
adapted.
crazy.
What is one question that you wish we would have asked you? And then what's your answer to that question?
Oh, I can't think of one. You asked great questions. This was awesome. I can't think of a question.
All right. Well, with that being said, it's time for our game show,
Okay.
which is true or false weather trivia. So basically, we'll ask you a question. You answer whether you think it's true or false, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Did you want to start off, Jordan, or you want me to go first, or what?
I can start it out if you're ready for it.
All right.
All right. Question number 1 for true or false. Crickets chirp frequency can tell you about the air temperature.
Yeah, they do.
So that one is true. Yeah, crickets are cold-blooded, and you will not hear them chirping when the temperature is below 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And to estimate the air temperature, you count the number of chirps you hear in 15 seconds and then add 37.
That is crazy.
Yeah, that's something I didn't know before researching questions for this episode.
I didn't know that either until just now. Wow.
So question number 2. Raindrops are shaped like teardrops.
You mean like kind of like long, like round at the bottom, but more elongated to the top? Yeah. Uh-oh. Oh,
False.
no. They're shaped like that.
Actually,
Go ahead.
due to surface tension and the action of gravity on falling drops, raindrops take on a hamburger bun type of shape rather than a teardrop shape.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 3.
Okay.
Clouds don't weigh anything.
Oh, clouds weigh tons.
Yes, you're right.
Tons.
So you're right with it being false. While it may seem as though clouds are light as air, when you're flying through them on an airplane, they're actually made up of millions and millions of tiny water droplets and or ice crystals. These tiny droplets are so small that they are suspended on air currents instead of falling to the ground like raindrops. In fact, if you do the math and estimate how many droplets make up a typical cumulus cloud, the water content can actually weigh over 1 million pounds.
Yep.
Question number 4. At any given time, there are approximately 2,000 thunderstorms occurring around the world.
Easily.
Yep, so that one's true. At any given time, there are about this many thunderstorms happening somewhere on Earth.
Absolutely. All right, question number 5. If you're in the mountains and lightning begins to strike, you should quickly get below the tree line and get into a grove of smaller trees.
Yes. That sounds right.
Yep. So, did you want to read the description for that?
Yeah, I'll read that one. That is true. So, make absolutely sure that you are not standing next to a tall tree when you're in the mountains. If you are standing next to a tall tree, you are more likely to get struck by lightning than if you are in a small group of trees.
So, number 6, Greek and Roman temples often were erected at sites where lightning struck.
Gosh. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
They worshipped gods here in an attempt to appease them.
Yeah.
All right, question number 7. Only 2% of tornadoes account for 70% of tornado-related deaths.
Yes. true.
That is true. Approximately one of every 50 tornadoes is categorized as violent, and they account for nearly 3 out of every 4 tornado deaths.
So I think you only got, what, 1 wrong there? That was pretty good.
Was that good? Did I
Yeah.
get a prize?
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's enough.
All right. Well, with that being said, that brings us to the end of the episode. Jordan, you want to start the sign off?
Yeah. So, Chris, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter at CSTCLAIR1, and well, there it is on the bottom, and I'm on the Instagram, and I'm on Facebook too as Chris St. Clair. So yeah, that's where I am, and I put stuff up pretty regularly.
That's fantastic. So, for those of you guys watching, you can see it there on the bottom of your screen. Be sure to follow us on social media on Twitter at the PDS Podcast. Manitoba Storm, MBS Storm Chasers, Manitoba Storm Chasers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then be sure to get Curtis in there at 706 photos everywhere.
Throw yours in there too, Jordan.
You can check me out Twitter, Facebook, YouTube at Jordan Hall WX. And be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app as well. Leave us a review if your player lets you. This helps us get found by the search engine as well.
Make sure you become a supporter on Facebook for the chance to win exclusive merch and prizes. And don't forget to head over to mbstorm.redbubble.com for your Storm Chase apparel needs, like this new shirt I'm wearing here. And make sure you tune in for episode 8 live on January 25th with special guest Jenny Hagen and her storm chasing partner, 2%, the storm chasing cow. And thank you again, Chris, for joining us tonight. And everybody that watched us live, thank you. And we will catch you on January 25th. See you guys later.